Hi everyone, today I'll be discussing this paper called pixelNeRF, Neural Radiance Fields from One of Few Images by Anjo's group at UC Berkeley. So in the remaining talk, I'm going to be using these two terms a lot, and I would like to first establish what I mean by that. So when I say scenes, I mean this is one scene, this is another scene, and there are a total of 8 scenes in the video. And when I say views, I mean the 3D projection onto the 2D image plane and viewed from some camera direction and position. So back to the main talk. One problem of NeRF is that it only relies on multi-view consistency and does not utilize prior knowledge common across scenes. But prior knowledge is useful in scene reconstruction. To give an example, like given this image, when I ask, how would it look like from behind? You can probably guess or have a vague view that it would look something like this, right? This is because that we've all seen chairs that are more or less similar to this chair. And this is an example of how prior knowledge is useful in scene reconstruction. So pixelNeRF does exactly that. It predicts the neural radiance fields from one or few images in the feed-forward manner, and does this by leveraging the scene prior learned from various different scenes. So here's an example. In this example, given just 3 input views, pixelNeRF is able to give a reasonable reconstruction result, whereas NeRF just doesn't work if only 3 input views are given. So the authors also compare pixelNeRF with other novel view synthesis method. So with just 1 input view, pixelNeRF is able to give good reconstruction results using the same network across all these different scenes. And the author also applies pixelNeRF on real-world dataset, and pixelNeRF gives reasonably good reconstruction results. And we'll come back to this example later. In the remaining talk, I'm going to talk about the architecture of pixelNeRF and the experimental results that demonstrate the generalization ability of pixelNeRF. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the simplest configuration of pixelNeRF. So given a single view input, generate novel views. And in this configuration, the inputs consist of 1 input 2D image, as well as the camera view direction and position of the input image. We are also provided with intrinsics. We're asked to predict the novel view at the target view direction and position. And the output is going to be the novel view at the target view direction and position. The authors actually made a really good video on illustrating their method, so let's take a look. The very first step is to use a CNN encoder to encode the input image to form a pixel-aligned feature grid. And then, at the target view direction, we sample a few points, and then we back project it to the input image pixel space to retrieve the image features. And then we pass the 3D coordinates, the view direction, and the image features that we just retrieved to the downstream neural network to predict color and density. And then we repeat this step for all the sample points along the view direction. And finally, to render 2D image, we do volume rendering. If that's too fast, I break it down into different steps. So the very first step is to use an image encoder to extract image features. And the second step is to sample along the view direction, and from these sample points, you back project them to the input image pixel space using camera extrinsics and intrinsics. So now that you get your pixel location in the input image, you can retrieve the corresponding image feature at that particular pixel location here. And we then pass a bunch of stuff into the downstream neural network, and that includes the positional encoding of XYZ, like this point, the target view direction, and the image features that we just retrieved from the pixel align feature grid. And we use all these information to predict the color and density. And more specifically, this is how the actual neural network structure looks like. So it's separated to two parts. The first part consists of 3 residual blocks, and the second part consists of 2 residual blocks. The reason why it's separated into 2 parts is because later on, in the multi-view case, the first part will actually replicate depending on the number of views you have. But the second part will stay the same. And finally, to predict the novel view, we do volume rendering just like NeRF. And if you are training, you can calculate the rendering loss by comparing it with the ground truth. So some implementation details here. For the image encoder, the author chooses to use a ResNet34 backbone, and it is pre-trained on ImageNet, then jointly trained with pixelNeRF. And the term pixel align feature grid actually means that the height and width of this image feature is the same as the height and width of the input image. And to form this, we extract the intermediate features from ResNet34. And as you traverse deeper and deeper into these CNNs, the height and width dimension decreases and the channel dimension increase. So to get a pixel align feature grid, you need to upsample these features back to the input image size. Another detail I want to emphasize is that the 3D coordinates and target view direction that goes into downstream neural network are transformed into view space. This is different from other methods that uses object-centered coordinate system, which is also called a canonical space. In an object-centered coordinate system, the coordinate frame is aligned to a consistent orientation of the object. For example, here, the positive y direction is always points towards the front of the chair, here. But there are some downsides of using this coordinate system. Firstly, it is not always available at test time, meaning that you don't always know the object's exact orientation for a novel view synthesis task. Secondly, the canonical space is only meaningful in single object scenes. We'll see an example later that illustrates this. And lastly, it is easier to memorize the training data in the canonical space. And to illustrate this, if all chairs at training are aligned to this coordinate system, meaning that the positive y direction always points to the front of the chair, then say at test time, I only provide you with this piece of information where the target view direction is the negative y direction. So you're essentially looking into the chair from here. Without telling you what the input view looks like, you can already tell me that the novel view would look something like this, right? So this part is the leg of the chair, and this part is this part of the chair. And notice that I didn't tell you what the input view looks like, and you can already tell me like a vague impression of the novel view. But this is bad for novel view synthesis because you don't have the guarantee that the coordinate system at test time is going to be the same as training time. So to prevent all these and make the method more flexible, the author chooses to use input view space coordinate system. Now let's take a look at the multi-view case where you have more than one input images now. First, take a look at this video. So here we have 3 input views. So we get all the image features correspond to that point and pass all of them to the downstream neural network. It's like very similar to the single view case. So some details here. Here's the actual architecture of the multi-view case. The first part of the neural network are replicated for each view, and the weights of them are shared across all views, and the intermediate feature here are averaged across views. The 3D coordinates and target direction are transformed to each input view space, just like the single view case. Now on to some experimental results. So the author did a bunch of experiments to show the generalization ability of pixelNeRF, and the difficulty of the tasks gradually increases. First, they apply the method on ShapeNet, which is a synthetic dataset that contains a bunch of everyday objects, and later on they apply it to real-world dataset. And the first task I want to talk about is category agnostic task. In this task, the author trained just one model on the 13 largest categories of ShapeNet, and it is tested on other views that are different from the views used in training of the same 13 categories. And you can see that quantitatively these numbers are better than the baselines. The second experiment is harder, where they train on one set of categories and apply pixelNeRF on unseen categories during training. The baseline does not apply to this setting, so the authors has to adapt them for the sake of comparison. And you can see that qualitatively, pixelNeRF produces better reconstruction results. The next task here shows the importance of the input view coordinate system. So when our test scenes consist of multiple objects scattered around, there's no meaningful way to define a object-centric coordinate system, and therefore the baselines that uses canonical space fails at this task. But pixelNeRF still works well in this case. Here the authors show that pixelNeRF has the ability of reconstructing real cars even if the training data only consists of synthetic data of cars. Finally, the author trains pixelNeRF on real-world data. This is harder because real-world objects has more complex geometry and inconsistent background. Also, the lighting condition varies. But after training, pixelNeRF is able to reconstruct objects from held-out scenes, given just 3 input views, which is pretty amazing. Despite the good results, there are some limitations of this method. It trains pretty slow, and one single training run takes around 6 days. The rendering process is also slow, just like the traditional NERF, and it requires manual tuning of some NERF-related hyperparameters. And experiments here are mostly done in controlled settings where the scene is relatively clean compared to the in the wild scenes. So to sum up, pixelNeRF excels at single or few image view synthesis. The main novelty involves using a fully convolutional image encoder to form pixel-aligned feature grid. The feature can then be passed to downstream neural network along with the 3D coordinates and view direction that are transformed to view space. With this method, pixelNeRF is able to learn a scene prior that generalizes across different scenes. That's it. Thank you very much.